to the East County API Coalition, Asia Pacific Islander Coalition of King County Candidates Forum. We are actually doing two tonight virtually, Bellevue and Redmond. So this is the Redmond City Council Candidates Forum. And tonight we do have four candidates with us who will introduce themselves in a couple minutes. Just let our guests know what basically our format is. This is a 90-minute runtime. We're going to give about 15 minutes for introductions. We've got about 60 minutes for questions. We've got 4 questions to ask the candidates. And because there's only 4 of them instead of the expected 6, this means we probably will have time for probably 2 audience questions. So I was told that our guests can enter questions in chat. It's going to go to another team member who's going to try to filter through them and see if there are any common questions. What we're asking for is if you do have a question, it should be applicable to all the candidates. You want all the candidates to have an opportunity to answer. So with that, I just want to again welcome you all. The API Coalition of Washington is a collection of various Asia Pacific Islander organizations throughout the state, and we're organized loosely into various county, sub-county groups. And so tonight's sponsor for the Eastside King County API Coalition Candidates Forum is Eastside for All, the Muslim Community Network Association, Indian American Community Services, and the Japanese American Citizens League Seattle chapter. And my name is Sheldon Arakaki. I am your moderator tonight, and I'm with the Seattle JACL, but I actually live in Bellevue. So, and I've kind of already outlined what the format's going to be tonight. So what we're going to do first, start off with, is just candidate introductions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. So why don't we start with Osman?
Great. And I know you had a twist. I'm not sure if that's introduction.
Thank you for reminding me, Osman. Yes. So twist is when you guys give your 2-minute introduction, please add in, please tell us about your interaction with the API community on the East Side, which is beyond Redmond. So I'm giving you guys a wide latitude. Could be Bellevue, Kirkland, Renton, but do please say something about your participation with the or interactions with the API community on the East Side. Thank you. Thank you, Osman.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. So hello, everyone. My name is Osman Salahuddin. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm running for Redmond City Council Position 1. Thank you so much for the honor of having all of the candidates here today, and then the community just being here. I think the beauty of this forum and what this room actually holds is seeing API leaders in one room, and that's something that having grown up in Redmond my entire life, I was surrounded by a lot of community members that were specifically South Asian growing up, and then moving into my schools, a lot of API community members that I interacted with. And when I look around Redmond, I looked at the statistics. 38% of Redmond's population is Asian or Pacific Islander. But then when I looked at Redmond City Council, there is one city council member who is a person of color. And when I think about representation, when I think about advocacy, and when I think about the resources and services that we need for the community, I think there needs to be a lot more opportunity for folks that have lived experience, that have experiences across different variety, a different range of backgrounds, and that lived ability to be able to go into community and advocate for them. So my parents immigrated from Pakistan. They came to this country to live the American dream. My dad is a small business owner. My mom is a special education preschool teacher. And everything that I've learned about service has honestly been through them. I decided to go to the University of Washington, had the opportunity to study neuroscience, but 2016 happened. And there was a president who directly affected the community that, I lived with and that I lived around. And, seeing those experiences negatively impacting my loved ones was a step that I needed to take in the direction of advocacy and service. So I ran for and was elected as student body president, represented 50,000 students at the University of Washington. And I want to take that, to the next level in Redmond, where, over 75,000 residents of all different backgrounds. I've interacted with so many different community members, including at the senior forum, senior lunch with Indian American Community Services 3 weeks ago.
There you go. That's 2 minutes.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. And Jessica.
Great, thank you. I'm Jessica Forsyth. I'm running to retain my seat on Redmond City Council, position 3. I use she, her pronouns. It's been an honor to serve Redmond for the last 4 years, and boy, what an interesting 4 years it has been. The pandemic brought a lot of challenges and also important opportunities for us to lead. And a few of the things I'm most proud of are added funding to our senior lunch program when we were told that they weren't filling enough, and we actually upped that to 2 times a week. Securing an additional $2.5 million in human services funding to support those most impacted by COVID, to help keep them housed and to help keep them fed. Raising the level of awareness around small businesses struggling to pay rent. And that meant talking with Senator Cooterer, which led to an invitation to talk to Governor Inslee's chief policy advisor. I also wrote the small business grant framework that was used by One Redmond, which resulted in helping 360 plus small businesses and micro businesses stay afloat. But we're a city that is continuing to grow, and we're in a really interesting period of growth, and it's important for us to get it right. So we've got to dig deep on affordability. We've got to improve access for all mobility types around our city. We've got to ensure access for all of these services from the folks that are feeling it the most, and the impacts of COVID and inflation are equitable. So we need our passionate voices to come forward, folks like you, in our legislative process to ensure that our future is fair, inclusive, and protected. And I will continue to be that voice, and I promise to make your concerns heard. One way I helped do that in relation to the AIPI community was last winter, when there was I'm sorry.
10 seconds.
Okay, there was an art exhibit where language was removed, and I helped navigate through that through the city process and get that language put back on for the AAPI community.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Let's move on to Vanessa.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa Kritzer. I'm the current vice president of the Redmond City Council, and I'm running for re-election to position 5 this year. It's been an honor to serve the past 4 years. By the way, I use she, her pronouns. Forgot to say that at the top. And I'm running for re-election because I love the city of Redmond. I love this community and the people in it and the incredible spaces that we're developing. And I'm inspired by how big of a difference local decisions can make on the lives of individuals and families, and also in helping to address major challenges that are facing our world. I actually began my career working in Washington, D.C. on international human rights, immigration, and environmental policy. And part of the reason I ended up moving back to Washington to live on the East Side again, where I grew up, was because I realized that the place where we make the biggest difference is actually right at the local level, organizing here. And, I've been able to do that for the past 4 years. I had that incredible honor and opportunity, especially to represent the perspective of people who have young families. I have 2 young kids, and I'm the only member of the council who has who brings that perspective, and actually was the first council member to have a baby while in office in Redmond. So which has been really eye-opening to just think about the types of things that our families need for a great quality of life. I'm very dedicated to making sure that we do the work that as Redmond grows, to make sure that we do it in a way that's sustainable, equitable, inclusive, and that does really keep our community as such a special place that is really open and vibrant, and taking advantage of all of the incredible diversity that we have in our community. one of the ways that I like to lead is just making sure that I work closely with community-based organizations and have dedicated a lot of my efforts in any decision that I make to being able to work with AAPI, culturally responsive community-based organizations in the work that we do, whether it's around human services, whether it's around small business, whether it's around housing
Yeah.
affordability.
10 seconds. Yeah, you're done.
To be able to make sure that that we really are making policies that are driven by our community, if they're going to be for our community. And I'm excited to share with you all more of my vision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, Angie.
Hi, my name is Angie Nueva Camina. I use she, her pronouns, and I am running for City Council position 7. I am a newcomer to local politics. I've lived in Redmond for 10 years. And although that I'm a newcomer, I believe that that's actually one of my strengths. I bring a lot of representation through various amounts of intersectionality. And I was so glad that Mr. Amit Gupta had ran, because I had been saying since filing, representation matters. And Mr. Gupta, when he was running, he pulled 20% of the vote in the primary without hardly campaigning whatsoever. I was so honored to have his endorsement after the primary, and we got to talk and connect. And this was so wonderful because there were so many values that we were in alignment with, such as, like Vanessa had said, having representation to where we're writing policy that is for us, by us, and having so many different voices at the table and truly diversifying the dais to where instead of having an us and them conversation, then it's a we conversation. And there are more of us sitting at the table making these decisions. After having 22 addresses, I'm a veteran, after having 22 addresses throughout my life, my address in downtown Redmond has been the longest at 6 years. Now, I've lived in Redmond for 10 years, 4 years prior on Rose Hill. My daughter graduated from high school from LW in 2014, and I have a current high school student at Redmond High who is a high school athlete. This age gap, it brings so much more lived experience, because then I've had working relationships with multiple generations.
10 seconds.
Thank you. My involvement with the API community has been mostly in Seattle, because I was doing a lot of business and a lot of direct engagement in Seattle. Now it has been brought over to Redmond after pandemic, with having direct relationships throughout the community, whether it is going to private engagements or community engagements. But my biggest involvement has been actually with FCS, the Filipino Community of Seattle recently.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, question 1. And we will start with Osman. Our communities have been rocked by the recent revelations about the tragic death of Janavi Kandula and the ensuing actions of the Seattle Police Department. The state legislature passed Initiative 940 in 2018, and among other things, it requires independent investigations of such critical incidents that involve law enforcement officers' use of deadly force. If a situation such as this arises in Redmond, do you know if the city has a transparent process for handling that investigation, handing that investigation over to an independent body? What is your position on the existence of such independent bodies to ensure there is accountability process in police departments? And thirdly, how do we make sure that the city will have transparency and engagement in that process? So this is a long one. So I'm actually going to pop this in chat because everyone's going to want to read this again. So give me a second here. Yeah, I hit send. Okay. So all 4 candidates, you're going to want to read this, right? So it's a 3-part question. So yeah, it's basic, right? Do you know if the city has a process for handling this and implementing Initiative 940? What is your position on the existence of this independent body, and how do we make sure that the city has transparency and engagement in the process? So, Osman.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. I'll start with, going down the list. With regard to Redmond itself, I don't know exactly whether or not the city has that transparent process. I would hope that they do, because the answer to the second question is my position on the existence of such bodies. I am very supportive of them. In my role with King County Council member Sarah Perry, I work very closely with the Office of Law Enforcement Oversight, which works with the Sheriff's Office and any Sheriff's Department's complaints or action or inaction. And working with their director, Tamer, I've been having a lot of conversations, particularly around the, not just this incident, the unfortunate incident that happened in Seattle, but others all across King County where whether or not there was life lost or harm done, there needs to be an oversight, there needs to be a check, and there needs to be a level of transparency that goes not only to the communities affected, but to the community at large. This could be anyone's sister, this could be anyone's cousin, mother, brother, father, this could be anyone's family members, this could be anyone's neighbor. And having such a process so that there is an independent investigation that's not compromised by specific agencies or departments, a different nuances, I think, is really critical. And how will we make sure that the city will have transparency and engagement? One thing that I do very closely in my role with King County Council member Sarah Perry as her community engagement manager is really having conversations and regular check-ins with our community-based organizations. I know Indian American Community Services is one of them. Muslim Association of Puget Sound, MAPS Amen has been another that we've had close conversations with, and really understanding the nuances of where our community has different experiences and where we can take those when we're actually at the table, when I'm sitting with different police chiefs or sheriff's officers across our district. Another experience that I've had the opportunity to be involved with is the Interfaith Committee of the Redmond Police Department. And sitting on that, I've gotten to interface with all different religious leaders and officials that have, their churches or their mosques or synagogues within Redmond. And what we've come to understand is, the problems that each of us face is, although we have different religious beliefs and backgrounds, the problems are the same. There is discrimination, there is hate in our communities, and we really need to actively work together and work with the police department to address that. So having that transparent form of communication from the community to the police department and to city leadership, such as our council, such as the mayor and our city staff, I think is really critical so that we can involve as many community members as possible in an incident such as this.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Jessica.
Thank you. First, I just want to say that the death of Miss Kandula was absolutely tragic, completely avoidable, and just something that should have never happened. And hearing about it, reading the stories was appalling, but hearing the actual tape of the call from the body cameras was just devastating and such a blow to all in our community and should never have happened and is absolutely disgusting. So yes, I fully believe in transparency. I do think the city has a transparent process, though I do think there's some room for improvement there. I'm fully in support of making sure that independent bodies do hold police accountable for when instances like this happen. We did have an instance in our community with Andrea Cherna, and was one of the main people leading the inquiries about that and about the investigation there. And I believe I can share with you that there is an independent investigation that has been opened in that. We just received word on that today. So yes, that accountability is there. And I fully support us continuing to rely on that and that process in the police departments. I think that we should definitely keep pushing, and I think it's community members that help us get that work done and continuing to get more answers and more transparency. I'm also, I had the opportunity of taking an FBI cohort training where I learned a lot about different types of FBI programs, and I'm using those contacts that I made there to help make connections when hate instances arise, when instances of discrimination against LGBT community happen, and making sure that like people feel that if they can't get answers through our police department, that they have some sort of outlet to get those sorts of answers. So all about transparency, all about accountability, and these are just things that we need to expect from our government.
Okay, thank you. On to Vanessa.
Thank you. And I guess I'll echo the other council members in just saying how heartbreaking this incident was and infuriating to be able to hear that recording. And that I think as leaders in our cities, we need to, it's our responsibility to make sure that things like that never happen, and that we create better cultures within our police departments. And as Jessica mentioned, I think one thing that weighs on me is that during my time on council that we did have a police-related fatality in our city. And so a lot of what I've been focused on in the time since then is working with my fellow council members and with our administration to make sure that we do have that we are improving in terms of a variety of things in the way that our police department runs. First of all, we did, as Jessica mentioned, have an independent investigation, and actually the details will be coming out to the public soon. But I think one of the things we also talked about was making sure that we make changes in our police department, learning from that experience so that it won't happen again in terms of how police communicate during situations like that. I think one of the things that I know our police chief isn't working on, but that I'd like to continue to advance on is increased anti-bias training. One of the things that I worked on city council with my fellow council members is establishing the first diversity, equity, and inclusion staff in our city. We only had people of color who were volunteering doing that work previously. And so we actually funded to create that. And then after we realized that one person was not enough, we added more resources so we could scale that up and give that person more authority. And I think that's critical because that work that we're doing out of that is giving training to city staff, including police, on this. And then I think, one of the other big pieces that we're working on that I think is really important is just thinking about how we do crisis response. And right now we're working on building a crisis response program that will focus on having alternatives to police in terms of responding to those experiencing mental or behavioral health crises. And one of my priorities is making sure that as we design that and any other sort of police related programming or response related programming is that we bring in the communities that might be most affected. So especially BIPOC community members and other historically marginalized communities to be able to come to the table as we design those. And then lastly, just in terms of transparency, I think there are two things that are important. We've pushed for transparency, and actually just in this last couple of months, now we have a police dashboard in Redmond that provides use of force data so that the whole public can see what our track record is over time in terms of police use of force, and we can hold ourselves accountable to that. And then I think just learning from the experience that we had in our city, I'm going to continue to advocate at a regional level to make sure that we get more resources for those independent investigations when these happen. Because one thing we saw was that there was a lot of delay in having that investigation due to backlog in the county's group that does that investigation. And so it's something that I've been talking about with our state legislators to make sure that we have more resources so that we not only have these independent investigations, but they can happen in a timely manner so that the loved ones of those who have been impacted by this, as well as those who need to be held accountable, can really have that justice served within a timely manner. So those are a couple of my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, Angie.
The The most recent death that we had, I mean, absolutely shook our city, our region, made national news. And in Black and brown circles, specifically Hispanic circles, we're almost numb at this point, unfortunately. And it's like, it has gone on and on and on. And there is always room for improvement. I'm aware, because I was following closely the death that we had here in Redmond, because as a single mother, where there have been times where, okay, I'm having a hard time, do I call the police? Well, in my communities, we're very scared to call the police, because now we've got another aspect that is coming into play. And we don't know, is it going to turn deadly or not? And this is a very real concern inside of our communities. So for us, calling the police is more of a liability. Like, what else am I adding to it? When we talk about policing, I think that the first thing that here in Redmond that we need to talk about is that just acknowledging that we actually do have an issue. And whenever there's room for more bias training, I love history. So I like to get to, what's the history of an organization? And when we take a look at what is the history of policing, then it is completely biased. It is completely based upon white supremacy. It was completely with bias included in it. And that was its role. So we need to be looking at how big of an impact do we need to have in order to course correct or undo all of that indoctrination that's happened. And coming from a family where several of my elders were in law enforcement, being able to have kind of a front row on both sides, right? Like having family members who are Black and that are law enforcement, and those that are not, and seeing, okay, how is this impacting the communities, but how is it on the inside, and how torn they are between, do we ascribe to our blue culture, or do we continue to be there for the community, and trying to navigate from the inside out and to change the system in some way while not losing sense of identity and sense of self. My position, of course, just clearly being direct with it, is that we need to be doing more. We need to be doing not only bias training, but acknowledging where it is that we have faults, that there's specific areas that we need to course correct. I love open transparency. I always welcome accountability, because I don't see it as being called out. I see it as being called up. And the more that we can get on the same page, and that it's not an us and them, it's an us, then that accountability, it goes a little bit easier. There's a bit more grace with it, because again, it's not being called out, it's being called up, so that our community can all be rising up.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Our next question, and Jessica gets to go first. The Together Center has reopened across the street from the Bella Bottega Jack in the Box, except now the 20 plus nonprofits now have 280 units of housing on top of it, on top of the offices. And according to Seattle Times, that includes 200 workforce housing, which I think they defined as for households that make 60% or less of the King County median household income of $106,000. Okay, and I understand this, the city was involved with the development of this project. So the question, housing question, obviously, is this how do you replicate this solution, because it is a solution, or is this a one-off, and where does the city go from here? Because obviously there aren't that many nonprofits that actually own the land where their office is.
Yes. Well, I hope it is not a one-off, because it is such an incredible project and it is such a model. And they're actually writing a white paper to model for the rest of the country. They've been asked to do that. And you're correct. it's such a unique situation where these nonprofits owned that piece of property. So my vision for how the city can capitalize on that knowledge that we now have in the city is that we look at, and I asked recently for a map of city property where it would make sense for the city to let that property be used for similar projects. So I am all about us taking that model and recreating it. It's absolutely amazing. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, please go do. I recently got the opportunity to tour the Health Point nonprofit that is there at the Together Center and really learn the capacity that they actually have. So you've got people in permanent supportive housing and 60% AMI and lower housing living above a resource that they can go downstairs and see their doctor and get their teeth cleaned and have behavioral health services and be given a soft handoff if they need other sorts of services. And that's just one of the 20 nonprofits that is in that space. These are the kinds of things that we need to keep duplicating throughout our city, throughout the region, throughout the country. This is just such an incredible model that it we have to duplicate it. I don't think there's a question in my mind, and I will be pushing to ensure that we're looking at all avenues possible. I think the city can absolutely step up, and we have land is really hard to come by, but there are some parcels that I think that we can duplicate similar services throughout the city.
Okay, thank you. Vanessa, your thoughts on the Together Center, and can we do replicate this? And is this the kind of solution we're looking for?
Well, I think that, and by the way, I mean, you might hear some kids in the background because my kids are trying to go to sleep, so apologies if it's a little loud. But I think the issue that you're really talking to is something that was like one of the driving forces for why I got involved in city politics. And actually, I got involved first as a planning commissioner when I was renting in downtown Redmond and was the only renter on the planning commission at the time, and then eventually ran for city council because I saw this need as our city's growing to make sure that we can grow into a city where people of all incomes can actually afford to live, and where we can have people from all different backgrounds and walks of life living together. And I think the Together Center is just one of my favorite projects, and I'm so proud that we have it right in our city and that we've invested so much. One thing that our council did was, on top of what we had originally planned to invest in through ARCH, the Regional Coalition on Housing, as well as some initial allocations that we had made towards the Together Center, was that during the time recently when they were building it, and there was the strike on cement workers, it delayed that project and increased the costs, and they ended up having a bigger gap. And so we actually allocated hundreds of thousands of dollars more to that project to help them to fill that gap. And that was really important to me, to make sure that we did that so that this could get finished as quickly and on time as possible, so that we could get both those nonprofits in their space and get people into that housing. I think some of the other opportunities that we have in terms of being able to recreate this, one is being able to be creative about how we think about our zoning with the upcoming comp plan, and being able to work with other types of organizations that have land. For example, churches. There's been a couple churches that have been looking into being able to use some of their properties to create more affordable housing. The other is how we actually create affordable housing in all kinds of new construction going up. In our city, we have inclusionary zoning, which means that 10% of all new housing that goes in has to be have 80% AMI housing in it. But one of the things we're looking at our comp plan is whether we could actually get deeper affordability required, as well as whether we could create incentives for developers to even create even more within existing buildings. One of the other pieces that we could do is to invest more deeply into ARCH. And then I think one of the things when we look at these incentives that we want to think about is not only creating, I think what's so great about the Together is that we not only create housing space, but we have those resources with it. So one of the places that I'm excited about to look at as incentives is how we incentivize to build affordable childcare underneath housing. How do we incentivize to create more community space where people can gather, more affordable nonprofit space? And that's actually something that we are looking at, especially in the Overlake area, where it's just going to be very expensive to outright take a piece of land. But if we could incentivize creating that, then we might be able to address it. Because when we do think about affordability, we're not just talking about housing. We're talking for families about, how they're going to actually put food on the table, and also how they're going to be able to send their children to childcare so that they can go to work and take advantage of these opportunities to have economic mobility. So those are a couple things that I've thought about. I think one of the other key pieces that I'm committed to is making sure that we do have some of that lowest income permanent supportive housing. I'm really proud that in Redmond we have permanent supportive housing at the former Silver Cloud site, and are actually working with King County to get that provider in and get people housed permanently there with wraparound supportive services that are going to help them to be able to sustain and exit homelessness forever. And I think that's something that is really critical for us to continue to invest in, and invest in our homeless outreach program, which helps to identify the people in our community who may need this support. And a lot of people don't know that actually our homeless outreach coordinator, she not only works with people who are homeless, but also people who are experiencing housing insecurity, to be able to support them with those services. And then lastly, as I mentioned about keeping people in housing, one of the things I'm super proud of that I worked on council is being able to pass our first set of tenant protections, to be able to make sure that people who are renting in our community, that they can continue to actually stay in their housing and afford to stay living here. And I think being able to make sure that they have quality environment to live in and are able to stay in their housing is really critical. And it's something where we're going to continue to work on those policies to make sure that people can actually continue to have those rights. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Angie, the Together Center.
There's several things that I absolutely love about the Together Center. One of them is I'm a solution-based leader, and I loved that rather than having stakeholders come in and say why it can't be done, everybody was aligned in the values. They were committed to the project, and they stuck with it until they found the solutions and how it can be done. And it was so refreshing to see, and everybody just pulling together. So whenever I see solution-based leadership being walked out and seeing, okay, we've got this adaptive issue, how can we shift, and how can we make this happen because we're committed to it, is wonderful, rather than no, it just can't be done. It's wonderful to see more affordable housing coming in, because we've got a definite need for it. When we've got numbers like Redmond's AMI is 146,000 right now. 6 years ago, it was 82. So when I think about those numbers and how fast they have jumped, and I'm a renter in downtown Redmond. I've been in my home for 6 years. So as I've been following these numbers, my concern is things like, what can we put in place to ensure that if someone is an Arch resident, that they continue to qualify for their home without fear of housing instability and no longer qualifying for their apartment, because now where they did originally qualify in between that 60 to 80% band, now maybe they're below 50 actually, because AMI has outpaced their pay increase. So what can we do to put something in place there? Being on the Planning Commission for the last year, I've enjoyed it immensely, because I've been able to bring a different lived experience to the table. And around, if someone is at 50% AMI, it was a commonly held belief that at 50% AMI, a single parent could not afford a car. And I said, no, that single parent most definitely will, because they will ensure that there's a roof over the children's head, because they know that their housing is unstable. So they will have a car. But what can we put in place to where there's something with the decoupling of parking? How can we make sure that we're supporting that family? because it's not just about affordable housing. As said earlier, it's also about having affordable living. How can we have affordable childcare? How can we have affordable food? With $25 to $30 hamburgers, I can't go out for lunch with my son for less than $50 and sit down for lunch right now. So how can I not only survive in Redmond and have a place, a roof over my head, but how can I thrive in Redmond and have stability across the board? Another concern that I have about standalone affordable housing is the bias that we have. Redmond is a rather affluent community. And when we're dealing with the top 20% of AMI being over $500,000 and the bottom 20% being right about 27,000, that's a huge delta. How can we ensure that we're not going to create where we're limiting the mobility, the socioeconomic mobility, and we're limiting upwards mobility to where now if somebody is known to be living at the Together Center or another project, then how can we ensure that they will continue to have upwards mobility and not have a bias against them? We've seen it throughout other cities, mostly major cities, but as we're growing, I think that it's important that we keep that in mind as well.
Okay, thank you. And for our last candidate, Osman, same question on the Together Center and housing affordability.
Yes, thank you so much. I love the Together Center. It is a jewel in Redmond, and in my role with Councilmember Perry, we meet with local nonprofits across East King County with over 100 community-based meetings throughout the year. And the number one thing that we hear whenever we bring up the Together Center is, why can't we have this in our city? When I look across each of these communities, the question I ask myself is, why don't they have a Together Center? Because it is such a great model, and I think the city of Redmond is a leader in bringing this to fruition, working with local private corporations, public entities, making sure that we have a full buy-in. Angie said it best, and this is for the community, by the community. This is a really important part of what we can do to be a model for the community. And so working with Executive Director Kim Sarnecki to help her push that white paper out, I think is going to be really critical, not just across Redmond, but across our region, so that this appeal of service-based housing, or housing with services, is not lost just in one community, and then everything else is left to build their own new programs, because we have a model and we already see that it works. So I think that's really critical in how we work with the rest of the region. Within Redmond itself, one of my top priorities is affordable housing and bringing more affordability to our communities. I truly believe in that 10-minute community model where you should have all of your resources, services, and opportunities within 10 minutes of you, walking distance, because it's a week without driving. So really making sure that we are aware of the opportunities of development and bringing in all of these services in one. It doesn't even have to be one building like the Together Center, but thinking of that 10-minute community model is really critical. I live in Marymore Village right now in an apartment that I will actually be priced out of in just a little bit here, because it's just incredibly unaffordable, the way that we've been moving forward with development, and thinking about, I don't even make the county median income. So making sure that we have the opportunity to help all of our community members. My own parents were priced out of Redmond. I want to make sure that our community who works and plays and goes to school in Redmond can afford to live in Redmond. And one idea Vanessa brought up, working with churches on their land. I used to be on the board of directors of the Muslim Association of Puget Sound, and I was the facilities director there. And my main purpose, or my main goal on that in that position, was really looking at the upzoning of that property, because it's in Marymore Village, right next to where the light rail will be coming in. And there's an opportunity to build affordable housing, not just for Muslim community members, but for community members of all backgrounds, building a real community center similar to the Together Center in that area. And I advocated for that at, when I was on the board. I think it's really important for us to work with local organizations such as MAPS, such as all of our other churches, synagogues, temples, to really look at how we're serving our own communities, because at the end of the day, we need to be at the table and provide for our communities when push comes to shove.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, before we go on to the third question, I just want to let everyone know that our timekeeper, Priya, was telling me that apparently the timer has been going off, but I haven't heard anything. And I'm gathering none of you have heard anything either. So I think, Priya, would you like to say something? Are you just going to raise your hand, or what are you going to do?
Yeah, I'm sorry I had interrupted a couple of you during your conversation just to keep track of the time. So the next time I think I'll raise my hand and also raise the emoji down. So if you see it on my face, you know that it's like the 10-second mark. So that's not abruptly ending the conversation. Sorry about that.
No.
Is the raise hand 10 seconds?
Yeah, the raise hand and also do the reaction so that you see both if you hand. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you, Priya, because I actually was wondering after a while, because I thought, hey, I'm not hearing anything. So thank you for letting us know. Okay, our third question, and Vanessa will lead us off here. So when it comes to city finances and revenue, apparently we have this thing called the 1% property tax lid. I noticed last year the city of Redmond had a public safety levy. And I've also heard from our county council members talking about how this 1% property tax lid is also straining the county's ability to fund services going on in the future. So how does this property, what do each of the candidates think that this property tax lid is going to do? What sort of challenges is it going to present for the city of Redmond in the coming 4 years? And is these separate levies part of a solution, or is there something else that we can do? Vanessa.
Oh, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think that that it is definitely a challenge that cities have to deal with. And actually that 1% property tax lid was a result of a Tim Eyman ballot initiative quite a few years ago, and has been a challenge for cities ever since then. And I think it's typically always on the Association of Washington Cities legislative agenda. But, I think one of the conversations we've had in our city a lot is about, in particular on our legislative agenda, advocating with the state legislature of having some more progressive sources of revenue in our state. Because partially the reason that our entire state, because we don't actually have income tax, we have one of the most regressive state tax systems in the country, which means that people who of lower income pay a disproportionately higher amount in taxes. And so I do think that that's something that we've talked about as really an important piece in our city to look at. In the meanwhile, with the constraints that we do have, we've looked at a variety of different opportunities to figure out how do we use the most of the revenue that we do have from the taxpayers. And, I think one of the things that I've experienced as being on the council during the pandemic, when we had a $20 million budget deficit during the first budget, in which I was the chair of the finance committee, was that we had to make some tough choices. But I think when we have to make tough choices, we have to orient ourselves in the values of what is most important to our community. So for example, that year we did, despite having some challenges in budget, we did decide to invest even more deeply in supporting our community, especially in terms of human services, because we wanted to make sure that everyone in our community would have a roof over their head and food to eat and what they needed to be able to survive, to be able to make sure that we had the support for vaccines and healthcare and the type of support that people needed at that time. We also invested in new things. Even in that budget cycle, we were able to make the choices to invest in a new diversity, equity, inclusion program, in the last 4 years, we've made some very robust plans and investments in protecting our environment, which is a huge value for me. In particular, we passed a 30-year sustainability plan and declared a climate emergency in our city. And we back that up by actually making some critical investments in making our buildings greener, our transportation more sustainable. And one of the things in transportation that we're really looking at is making sure that as we prepare, I'm sorry, I'm confused about what the hand is. Is that 10 seconds or is that? Oh, okay, great. Well, I will just say, I think for me, it's about making these choices and about thinking of what's most important for our community and bringing them along as we make those choices, and then looking for opportunities to be able to create more revenue for the things that we care about, and learning from some of our past mistakes in what maybe didn't work in that levy. But if we don't get it through a levy, finding the ways to be able to fund the things that are most important to us regardless, as stewards of the public's funds. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Angie.
I'm so grateful that Vanessa went before me in full transparency, because the answers were incredible. And it hasn't been something to where I could have spoken on it like that. So thank you. With the 1% lid on there, one of the things that I get to bring is being the solution-based style of leadership. Always looking at, okay, but how can it be done? I understand that we've got limitations within it, but how can it be done? I'll get to rely on my background that I've had in finance and long-term planning, where I'm making plans for 30 years out. How can we do what we need to do now while still planning for the future? Getting very clear on what the values are of the community, because whether I'm scaling a business, I'm working with a retirement plan, it's all comes down to values. If we're going to have something that is sustainable, if it's going to be very clear as to when we need to make those hard choices, some hard choices are very clear. They may not be easy to execute or to say this is what we're doing, but it's clear when we're all in alignment, like these are our values, when we're clear on the values. So taking a look and always running our budget through that values process. Being creative around what are our options? Is it going to be an additional levy? Is there another financial vehicle that we can leverage while still being compliant? And just looking for how can it be done?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Osman?
And could you repeat the full question again?
Okay. We have a 1% property tax lid, okay? And how do you foresee this impacting the city of Redmond's fiscal responsibilities and budget making in the next 4 years as a city council member? As we've heard from our county council members, this is going to put a significant strain on the county to provide services in the coming decade. Okay, so how is this going to impact at the city level? And are these levies, like last fall's public safety levy, is that a solution or the solution to work around this?
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing this up. As a county employee, knowing that there's $100 million shortfall for the 25-26 budget at the county level, which impacts services such as those for domestic violence and sexual assault resources, helping small businesses and farmers, and job training for BIPOC youth. Those are all things that, to me, are core to what a city, a county, a jurisdiction needs to be able to provide to its residents. And having those opportunities cut short because of a regressive tax structure is, to me, it's harmful to the future of our community. As a younger candidate myself, I'm going to be seeing, and the youth that are working with me are going to be seeing the effects of this for many, many, many years to come. And I think we really need to advocate at that state level to, one, work on the tax structure. Two, at the local level, I think Angie hit it spot on. We need to look at diversified ways that we can look at our budget and explore creative ways to advocate for funding allocations and funding resources. One thing that I do in my current job is share grant opportunities with all local jurisdictions, local nonprofits. And one grant opportunity that I specifically, I think I reached out to just some local offices is the Safe Streets for All grant. And I remember that grant specifically because the town of Snoqualmie Pass applied for it. It's a $5 billion federal grant, and every entity that applied for it across the country got funded. So Snoqualmie Pass got $500,000. And I'm not saying it's free money, but there are resources out there that we can really look at when we're looking at how we can, build back the budget that is undoubtedly being harmed right now because of that 1% lid. I also think that we need to look at what the community wants. I listed a few of the services that are in threat of being cut at the county level. And so when we look at the entirety of Redmond residents, we need to go to them and ask, whether it's by a community survey, whether it's hosting panels or community listening sessions within locations, we need to ask them, what do they prioritize in the budget? I know that the city of Redmond did a survey, I believe either earlier this year or last year, about what is most important to Redmond residents, which I also use to, gear up my policy points and my priorities, because it's really important to listen to the community. But, when we're asking specifically about the budget, we need to talk to everyone who's affected. We need to be able to reach as many folks as possible. And if there's one issue that only one person cares about, that's still one person who's going to be impacted by that. And we need to take that seriously. And if it's a levy, if it's other diversified sources, the city needs to take a strong look at how we communicate with our community.
Okay, thank you. Jessica.
I absolutely love this question because we have done a lot around this. And I wanted to add that the 1% property cap makes us the most regressive state in the country. So we are 50. Like, this is unacceptable to me. So I have worked with Senator Cooter and talking about, changing that. And there's so much work to do at the state level to try to reverse our regressive tax structure. So we've got to do so much work on this topic. And some of the things at the city level that we have done in the last 4 years, and I've been a part of, is a CIP, a capital investments project proviso process, where we are now getting more transparency around the money that is being spent. So it's showing more accountability to the public on how those tax dollars are spent. And we actually have like a red light, yellow light, green light system, so you can tell if the project is on budget, on time, and it really helps provide better clarity. With the pandemic, a lot of these projects are coming in over budget because resources are hard to get, which compounds timelines, and it's making it much more upfront when you see costs shifting from where they initially were. We also have, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. We've also been leaning more on grants and looking into other opportunities. This council has been very active at like, is there a grant for that? And a lot of the times there is, and it's been really exciting to get money so that we can have, we can use that grant money so that we can actually shift things around a bit and pay for things in other ways. We also just recently invested or made a policy for a transportation benefit district so that the money that comes in from that will be used to put back into our roads and making sure that our roads are up to par and you're not going to see potholes, and we're actually able to do that work faster with that money. So that's actually specifically allocated just for our roads, which then can free up some other money in other places. Also, in the last session, Senate Bill 5452, which authorizes impact fees revenue to go towards infrastructure improvement for bike lane and pedestrian facilities, actually came out of conversation that we had in our council, and I pushed on, can we use that money for off-street infrastructure? And the answer was no. And I said, well, why not? And so our city went to the state and passed that infrastructure bill, and now that money can be used statewide. So there's all kinds of creative solutions. We just have to find them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. For the fourth and final set question, and we'll have Angie start. First, the Asian American Pacific Islander community, been growing quite a bit on the east side, and largely through immigration. And a lot of the immigrants start small businesses, right? I mean, you can see it all over Redmond, whether it's the restaurants, the cafes, the small groceries, or any of the services that you see around in the city. Okay. Now, local business owners have expressed a feeling that their needs and voices are overshadowed by the priorities of larger companies like Microsoft and Amazon. So, how can we make sure that the Chamber of Commerce remains a useful and attentive resource to the needs of small business owners, while, of course, continuing to take care of the needs of the large tech companies? So, what are one or two concrete changes you would pursue to make it easier for the smaller businesses to operate in Redmond? And how will the chambers of commerce with small businesses connect with the community-based organizations?
So I absolutely love small business. Of course, we see it throughout, right? That small, especially mom and pop brick and mortars, they are the backbone of our country. Economic is driven on small businesses. And largely, they are driven by minority-owned small businesses. However, minority-owned businesses do not get the same support as their white counterparts. We know this. We see this. So specifically in the AAPI community is, number one, acknowledging that it is not a monolith, and that the issues that are faced in one community are not necessarily issues that are faced in another. So to treat the AAPI community as a monolith first is wrong. So first, we've got to get away from that. And then identifying with the business owners, what specifically are your challenges, number one, to entry, and number two, to sustainability. So with this, I've already started working. I love small business. I love equity. I love things being accessible, and I am driven by possibility. So I've already started working with 6 other leaders here on the east side, so that regionally we're identifying specifically for minority-owned businesses, because Bellevue is already a minority-majority city. Redmond will soon be. So already working throughout the 405 corridor to identify what these issues are, what support do they need. And oftentimes it will be that they're going to their chambers, and their chambers are using old models that do not work in cultural markets. And they're trying to put in a formula that does not work in the cultural markets. So being able to get models and ways of working that are actually workable, rather than trying to relearn things. When we take a look at business incubators or peer-to-peer support throughout business owners, minority business owners, when it's peer-to-peer, then the businesses not only are started up faster than if they go through their chamber, but it is also more profitable right away. And a lot of times, if we're talking about a startup specific, we've got VC money involved. And this is a different demographic than the mom and pop on Main Street. So that was another thing, is taking a look at, when we say small business, are we talking about that startup VC backed, or are we talking about mom and pop with a bookstore? Thank you, Priya.
Okay. Thank you. On to Osman.
Absolutely. And I love this question. As I mentioned earlier, my dad is a small business owner and has been my entire life. He actually owns a print shop in Seattle, and somehow through the pandemic, the print shop tripled. So he has now 3 print shops across our region. And, I'm very fortunate that he has found success as a small business, a minority-owned small business, an immigrant who came to this country. And that has not been the case with a lot of his peers. My dad actually also tried starting a restaurant, and that failed miserably. And so there are just, different opportunities that folks have. And when our community does not necessarily have the exact resources that other folks are given, that other communities are given, it is really challenging to get something off the ground. And during the pandemic, that was something that was faced by a lot of community members, which is actually something that when I was on the board at MAPS, I had the opportunity to help found the Small Business Resiliency Network at MAPS, which really helped minority business owners, nonprofits, providing them resources, technical assistance, helping them apply for ARPA funding, other services that they really needed to thrive, because otherwise that just was not seen. I think One Redmond is doing an incredible job with their small business development center. But when I go to meetings, when I talk with their leadership, there is a gap. There's no real API, representation. There's not that level of, how do you run Upna Bazaar as an Indian grocery store versus how do you run Safeway? It's completely different, and you have to be in tune with what the community actually sees and what the community needs. So I've been working closely with VJ, who owns the Redmond Upna Bazaar, to see, how do we bring this model of a community grocery store, not just for the Indian community, but for everyone, outward into the community. So specifically to policy, I would love to work with One Redmond with their SBDC to implement more, like the city of Redmond and council pushed for more diversity staff, push for more diversity within the work that One Redmond is doing, and specifically in tune with the community organizations that are already on the ground doing work, the small businesses that are already doing the work, because they're not a part of the chamber, and that's something that's missing. Another thing that I would love to work on is incentivizing developers to prioritize the small businesses that they're ultimately displacing. I think it's the Zephyr building in Redmond that has a Starbucks, which is one block away from Five Stones, another block away from Victor's. There doesn't need to be a Starbucks. I don't know if Starbucks is listening, but I think there just needs to be more opportunity for our small businesses and all across Redmond.
Okay, thank you. Jessica.
Thanks. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I very quickly realized how this was going to impact our small businesses being closed down for what we first thought was going to be a couple of weeks. So I ended up doing a lot of outreach to small businesses and hearing the concerns from small businesses all the way up to Everett and through Bellevue, through Redmond, and taking that information and talking with our state senators and Governor Inslee's office, the policy advisor, to work to bring forward proposals for grants, for rent freezes, for alternative solutions to support the community and during the pandemic. And ultimately, that led to me writing a small business grant proposal that I brought to the city, and was promptly told that the city was not able to make that happen and to do that work. So when the opportunity arose through talking to Christina Hudson at One Redmond, where she said that they were starting to look into small business grant opportunities, I said, I wrote this thing, please take it. So they did. They took it. They changed nothing about it, which was amazing, because the way it was structured was that it focused primarily on micro businesses, which are businesses of 5 people or less, and 50% of the businesses that were served had to be micro businesses. So it ended up helping, I mentioned this at the top, it ended up helping over 360 small and micro businesses. And there's so much more we can do. I think that we absolutely need to work towards the displacement rates that are happening due to development. I think we need to ensure that when property is redeveloped, that we are working with One Redmond, with our community and economic development team in the city to actually help house those businesses throughout our city. I think we should have some sort of program where we help with moving costs. Like that would be a huge incentive to a small business just to be able to not worry about that displacement, cost of having to move their business across town, having to get new stationery, having to change their address on all of their materials. So I think there's a lot we can still continue to do to make our small business community strong and vibrant. And I look forward to doing that work in the next 4 years.
Okay, thank you. And Vanessa?
Thank you. I'm going to start a timer for myself because I keep running over on time. I'm really excited to share about this question because it's been a big focus. Obviously, in the last 4 years, our city, in going through this pandemic, one of the top issues for me has been making sure that our small businesses can make it through, and that we give the unique support that especially our diverse businesses actually need in order to be able to thrive. You mentioned a little bit about One Redmond as our Chamber of Commerce, but what's interesting also about One Redmond is that quite a few years ago, it was formed where they actually got rid of the Chamber of Commerce and created this public-private partnership organization that is also, that's both the City of Redmond's economic development arm, as well as a Chamber of Commerce. And it's governed by a board that's made up of not only businesses, but also the city and our community technical colleges in the area, to actually come together to think about how we create a thriving economy. And so when the pandemic hit and our businesses were really struggling, I actually asked Christina at One Redmond, what can we do to be able to help our businesses? And she said, well, we actually need a council member in one of the governing seats on the One Redmond board. And so I joined in and actually worked really closely with her to be able to help to shape the vision from the economic development side of what One Redmond does to be able to support our businesses. So in terms of the development of the Eastside Spark, One Eastside Spark program, which helps to create small business resiliency, and then really tapping into the connections that I was making with a lot of our culturally responsive community-based organizations, like IACS, working with MCRC, working with even also with other groups like Centro Cultural Mexicano, and being able to say, how can One Redmond be doing better at partnering, and kind of pushing in my role to be able to encourage them to do a better partnership with a lot of our community-based organizations. One of the pieces of feedback that I've heard a lot in just the partnership that we do, because I think there has been some great work in terms of offering small business support webinars in different languages, and being able to offer more culturally competent types of resources, is that we do rely on our community-based organizations to do a lot of that work. And one thing that I'm excited about in our new small business grant program that we're rolling out right now, we actually have just invested money to fund a new program using American Recovery Program Act funds. Is that we've allocated money to actually do contracts with community-based organizations that will cover their costs for doing that work with One Redmond and with our city, to be able to work with a lot of those businesses to help with the resiliency. And so I think that's really critical, is that if we work with partners, that we actually compensate them for the time that they put in. So that way they're willing to scale up in the future. And because as some of the others mentioned, we have some big challenges ahead for our small businesses, not only coming out of the pandemic, but with the pressures of growth, to make sure that they can stay here in our city and thrive.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes our 4 primary questions. We did ask for questions from the audience. We actually have 4, and we've probably got 7:22, and we did start a little late, so we'll probably just do one of the questions. I did want to let Craig Peck know, I read your multi-part question. I love it. There is actually going to be a housing candidates forum focused on housing coming up I am cutting and pasting this question and sending it to them. A couple of the sponsoring organizations for this forum are also going to be for the other forum, so I'm going to give this one to them for their set. I'm going to go with Anila's question. Yes, it's a really good one. It's a very good point. Renters are the majority now. I'm going to go with Anila's question. Give about 90 seconds for this one because, you know, this is the API Coalition of Washington and its various affiliate county organizations. It is a group of community-based organizations as we try to advocate for communities. And of course, one of the things we try to do is have a candidates forum to educate our community about some issues and the candidates and the positions. So this is a really good one. Anila is posing is for each of you, can you tell us about which community-based organization or nonprofit that you've most worked with, collaborated with, or consulted with in your time, either in office or, you know, outside of office as a volunteer? Which one have you worked with, collaborated, consulted with the most? So 90 seconds. And in this last round, we started first with Angie. So we'll start all over again with Osman.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I have collaborated with a lot of the organizations on this call. So I would, love to call out MAPS Amen as one of the core organizations that I've really been affiliated with in terms of my partnership with Anila and the organization there. Just one example is, King County Council had never recognized American Muslim holidays. You know, there are holidays across our country that are recognized. People have days off, and Eid is a celebration that a lot of Muslim community members celebrate twice every year, and that had historically never been recognized. I worked with MAPS Amen. I worked with a few other local leaders to bring that to council. Councilmember Perry worked on putting together a recognition, and we ultimately passed that, which was incredible. To show the community that they care about that. The council cares about the residents, and I would love to do the same thing in Redmond. And I don't think we need to stop at just one holiday or one recognition. I would love to recognize as many things as possible because our community is so great and diverse. I also work really closely with Indian American Community Services, attending pretty much all of their events if I can, and try to be really sharing their resources and advocacy out with the community.
Okay, thank you. Jessica.
Thank you. So, throughout my childhood, I volunteered with the American Legion, Special Olympics. As an adult, got really involved with the League of Women Voters, and I ran an organization called Help Portrait, which went into underserved communities and took portraits of community members that would normally not be able to afford them, and gave them to them, and we did hair, makeup, family portraits. And that was always a really big win because we got to give people something that they wouldn't normally have. And sometimes those people would be people who had never had a portrait other than their mugshot taken. And so they were looking to use that for their LinkedIn profile so they could find a new job. But bringing it back to more during my time in office, probably worked most closely recently with Pride Across the Bridge, which when it first started off was just Redmond Pride, and helping advise Axton about what a Pride in Redmond could look like. And the first time I met them, I told them, I see you starting a nonprofit. And they just did that this year. And it was very exciting to work closely with them and see their vision come to life.
Okay, thank you. Vanessa?
Well, this is such a great question because it's definitely at the core of how I've approached leading on council. When we make decisions, I like to go out into the community and to be able to talk with organizations that represent different perspectives in different parts of our community. And we're lucky enough to have such amazing organizations in our community like IACS, like MAPS and MCRC, like Essential Cultural, like Pride Across the Bridge, or the Emotional Abuse Discussion is one of our newer nonprofits that's doing really amazing work. And then also, you know, one of the things that I've been really excited about has been efforts, because during the pandemic there was so much need and so many gaps exposed in terms of people's basic food and other sorts of needs, is that I helped to work with a group of people to restart a monthly meetup of everyone working to try to fill those gaps. So lots of different human services organizations coming together and individuals through Nourishing Networks to have just a regular meetup of all those people to actually say who in our community is having this need and how can we work together to be able to fill those gaps. And that's been a really cool and dynamic space. And then I think the other place that I've been really excited about working with our community on has been on projects where we've been making big decisions, like the new construction of our new Redmond Senior and Community Center. We went through a process for almost a year and a half of having nearly monthly meetups, or actually both Jessica and I joined in with a big group of community stakeholders, including a lot of our community-based organizations, to design that so that it would meet the needs of our community, not just our seniors, but also people of all ages, and be able to be a space where we could celebrate culture and the arts as well. So that's something I'm very excited about.
Okay, thank you. And Angie.
I love that this question made me think about, because I'm not in office, so, you know, answering Anila's question around what have I done to get a feel of it. And as I'm going through it, I'm thinking about, okay, what all organizations have I been affiliated with or engaged in some kind of way, and which one has been the most? And it's been, well, there was this project here and this project here and this project here. And I thought, well, that seems really scattered. And then I identified, I'm so grateful, Anila, that you asked this question, that it was, where is the immediate need? And where do I need to pivot? Where can I tap in and be of service and have an impact and do good? Where, okay, there's a need over here. So whether it was the Edmonds Food Bank when I lived in Edmonds, and that's when I started my consulting business, there was a run on the food bank, and they weren't going to have enough holiday meals throughout the December holidays because of Thanksgiving, and rallying the business community in Edmonds to make sure that there was enough food so that families of 4 or less were not getting a chicken for December holidays. But whether it was being an art docent with the Lake Washington school districts because they had just cut art classes, being on the board for Junior Mustangs football, if it's helping out with Pride Across the Bridge, if it's traveling to Thailand and working with people who had been trafficked in the sex industry and getting them connected to local resources, using my privilege as a Westerner to make the introduction, to meet them, and then hand them off to local resources. Whether it's now, you know, doing financial 101 classes with the emotional abuse discussion with that organization or with Pride Across the Bridge. It has always been, what is the need? How can I be of service? And just moving around and pivoting.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna close here. The candidates will all have 2 minutes for a closing statement. So let's start with Jessica.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm really excited about everyone that's here. I hope to be serving with each of you in the coming 4 years, and because running is not an easy thing to do. It's not easy work. You put yourself out there. It's probably the longest and worst job interview that any of us will ever do, but we all do it for the same reason. We do it for our belief in community, and we do it for the opportunity to serve our neighbors. And it's been a goal of mine while being in office to make government more accessible, including breaking down barriers to elected officials. So if I've missed anything, if you want to talk about anything, reach out to me. I'm available for a cup of coffee. You can call me up, send me an email. I'm ready and willing to continue doing the hard work, and I'm dedicated to ensure that everyone's voice is heard in this process and through this work. And I hope that I will earn your vote this November. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Vanessa.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for the really thoughtful discussion tonight. I also am just feeling so energized by hearing my fellow candidates and their answers and envisioning working together. I think one of the things I've brought to the council has been a real focus on collaborating together and really seeing our city government as working together in service to our residents. And it has been such an honor to be able to serve in this role, and I hope to be able to continue. One of the things I think that I've really focused on in the last 4 years has been creating and pushing forward a lot of plans for various policies, whether that's plans for climate change, our housing action plan, our diversity, equity, inclusion planning. We actually just did a strategic plan to overhaul how we do human services, looking at how we reimagine public safety. And now I think in the time ahead, this is the time when we will take action on those plans and pass those really robust policies. One of the biggest ones is the comprehensive plan. So the people who get elected in this election are going to be making some of the most important choices that won't just affect the next 4 years in our city, but will affect the next 30 years. And really the direction of what kind of city we become. What kind of city do we want to be? And what I want to see is a kind, inclusive community, a community where everyone can live, and a community that also takes action to make sure that future generations are going to have a great planet and place to live in. And I look forward to being able to do that. And I guess I would just close by saying that I appreciate the chance to be able to speak tonight, but I do think that one of the most important roles of city council members is to be accessible to their public and to make our policies not based on our own vision, but based on what we're hearing from you. So I hope you'll reach out, always open to grab coffee or connect, and hope to be able to see you and discuss the many good questions you put in the chat one-on-one. And I hope that I can earn your vote in November. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Angie?
Vanessa, thank you for bringing up how important it is with this election and who is elected, and understanding that we're making decisions for the next 30 years. Inside of my decision-making process and as a solution-based leader, I will often, culturally, it's very important for me to always go to my elders for counsel, those who respect my agency as a leader. Go to them for counsel. Go to my peers to find out, who are also in the arena, to find out what is their experience, what's their experience, what's their take on this thing that we're facing. But please understand, my ultimate accountability, those that call me up, not out, is to the younger generations, because I fully understand that the decisions that I'm going to be making over the next 4 years, if elected, will impact the next 30. I've been working on a comprehensive plan on the Planning Commission for the last year, and we've done some really beautiful work together. Very diverse commission, bringing very different skill sets together and working together instead of against each other, because each of us come with very different strengths, and being able to value each other's differences, to where then we've got those wonderfully rich, diverse strengths coming to the table. It's exactly what I plan on doing while on the dais as part of the council if elected. Thank you for having me. Thank you for sponsoring this evening tonight. And I'm so looking forward to participating and building community with you all.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, Osman.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here tonight. I know that, spending time on the evening on learning from and hearing from candidates is not what everyone likes to do, but I really appreciate everyone leaning into this work. I just want to say I'm incredibly blessed and grateful to have the support of so many community members around me. And I wish I could thank everyone, now and every single day in everything that I do, but it's just very dear to my heart, just knowing how much people are leaning in to helping me, helping all of the candidates here hopefully get elected to Redmond City Council, because the issues that we're discussing today, like Angie mentioned, are going to be affecting us for the rest of our lives, the rest of Redmond's 2050 plan. There's just so much room for us to be involved. And I mean, I could spend all of my time talking about engaging the youth, but I will do a little pitch right now, which I just announced, and I'll be sending emails out to each of the organizations on this call. I'm working with a lot of local leaders, as well as the Build a Bench program from Councilmember Gurmai Zahalai, to bring that Build the Bench program in a youth leadership summit on October 28th, because my term, hopefully all of our terms will be done in however many years we choose to serve, but I want the next generation of young leaders to be able to step up. So October 28th, 12 o'clock, Redmond Community Center, going to have hopefully many, many youth there who will be that next generation of leaders, because ultimately my vision in serving is for them. I want to be in service for our next generation. And I think that that's really critical for all of our communities, especially those who are from API communities who have historically not been seen, not just in Redmond politics or government, but across the country. And it's time for all of our BIPOC community members to be stepping up and have the opportunity to step up in this way. So thank you all so much.
Great, thank you. And so, yeah, thank you to all of our candidates for joining us tonight. And more importantly, just thank you for filing and running for office and putting it out there, because, echoing Jessica, I agree, this can be a lonely journey. So thank you again for putting yourself out there. And of course, for especially if you're not an incumbent, for having to drink from a fire hose and try to learn all this policy and issues in such a short period of time. Again, I want to give another shout out and thank you to our 4 community sponsors tonight: the Indian American Community Service, the Japanese American Citizens League, sorry, the Muslim Community Network Association, and Eastside for All. And I also want to give a special thanks to the 2 other members of this event crew tonight. Nanda, who was behind the scenes, making sure people got into the right Zoom room and making sure that we were still functioning. And of course, to Priya, our timer. Just want to give a special shout out to Priya and Nanda for your help tonight too. So thank you everybody for attending. Don't forget, ballots drop on October 18th in 2 weeks. So you should have something in the mail October 19, 20, 21. If you don't have something by Halloween, you don't have to panic, because King County Elections does make it easy. You can actually go online to King County Elections and print out your ballots. I had to do that for the primary last year. My ballot did not arrive in time. And don't forget, of course, you just have to drop your ballot in the mailbox without a stamp. And you can also just go to Redmond City Hall and drop your ballot in the ballot box there, which is actually what I do. So anyway, again, thank you everybody for being here tonight. And please vote. Don't forget to vote. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.